Dhiren Master. Welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Thanks for joining me, old friend.
Well, Patrick, it's just such an honor to be invited. Thank you very much, and great to catch up. Yes, old friends indeed. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
It has been a long time. I realize that we really haven't reconnected since about 2000 and the end of 2007, and I have a time frame for that because as we transitioned out of the project that we were working on at the time called Thermoblade, I came to British Columbia. It's when I actually moved over to the Real Estate Investment Network, stepped in as and now step in as CEO of the Real Estate Investment Network. And so we haven't caught up for a long time. So this is literally catching up in real time and figuring out what each other's doing. But this is all about you. And you were always so...
my favorite subject, by the way. My favorite subject.
yeah, there you go. Well, it's most people's favorite subject, isn't it? I can tell you...
and if they don't say so, they're lying.
That's true. So, back in those days, Dhiren, when we were working on that project, I learned so much from that project, but specifically, I learned a ton of things for you in terms of business and how you operate, the things that you do. And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, but give me some updates of, when people ask Dhiren what he's doing these days, what's your answer to that question?
Well, look, the very short answer is I'm waiting for the universe to catch up with my expectations.
Right.
So, but which obviously is a really weird, cryptic answer. But in terms of kind of what the normal kind of answer would be is, well, I'm living in the UK. I've got a startup company that I started up about 2 and a bit years ago called HRClarity.ai. Which basically I've invented a whole bunch of software that kind of figures out who's going to leave, who the good line managers are, who the bad line managers are, and optimizes total reward. And I'm hoping to ideally sell that business off because I'm absolutely bored silly with it. I'm writing a book called Musings. And it's a series of snippets, a kind of a page and a half on various thoughts on metaphysics, spirituality, and people. And you won't believe this, Patrick, I got an email out of the blue saying, "Are you interested in modeling?" And I said yes. And so I've signed myself up for 3 modeling agencies. I haven't got the call yet, but and I don't know whether it's a big, massive scam. But that's about it, really. That's all that's happening.
I think that's fantastic. So let's go back. I want to talk a little bit about, you also wrote a book, a self-published book called Second Chance. And tell me a little bit about that.
So that book was basically, it's an autobiographical account. I wrote it as a fictional story, but it was about my kind of search for, is there a God? And if there is, what kind of God is there? And how does one become a good person? And it was all about what happened to me pretty well much between 1995 and 2001. And it's set in India, but it's set in different parts of the world. But that's basically what that is. And really, that book is meant to help you think about what you think. So, there are some questions that, we all have, and we all have answers for those questions, but we may not necessarily have explicitly thought. So, for example, every one of us has a view as, is there a God? And some might say yes, some might say no, but you have a view on that. What happens to us after we die? Everyone has a view on that, but maybe they haven't really thought about it, as to whatever it is that they believe may or may, there may be alternatives, etc. And what's the secret to be, what's the purpose of life? And there are about 7 kind of questions. And depending on how you answer those questions is that you'll have a certain view of the world, a worldview. And based on your worldview, you will act in a certain way. And the reason why some people act in given a same situation, some people might act as A or B or C or D, is all depending on their worldview, how they're processing that particular situation. And the purpose of that book was for you to examine what are your worldviews at the moment, and for you to kind of go through a more of a conscious process of evaluating whether your worldview is right or not right, or consider alternative worldviews. Because the reality is that for each of these questions, there is no way to say this is the answer. Is there God? Well, you can't prove it. What happens to you after you die? You can't prove it. So these are a set of beliefs that, are a set of beliefs. They cannot be objectively proven. And that's also very important for you to realize, is that, you may be believing in a particular set, but if there's somebody else believing in another set, you must just understand that's what they chose to believe in the same way that you chose to believe. And if you do that, you'll be able to understand why they're behaving the way they're behaving. And hopefully that will give a better understanding of the other person. And understanding is diminishes ignorance, and ignorance is what causes hatred.
These are quite philosophical conversations, but I think they're so valuable in kind of examining that. I mean, to understand somebody else, in maybe how they operate, why they operate that way. But from my perspective, and I mean, a body of the work that, Stephanie and I do, for example, is understanding how it affects you. So we have these beliefs, we have these ways of seeing the world. To your point, it actually causes us, or is how we make the decisions, how we choose certain life paths, how we even choose partners and significant others, because of how we view the world. So part of this is really a self-examination as well, I'm thinking. Is that the case?
Oh, absolutely, Patrick. You hit it on the head, and it's so critical. And this is something that I mean, I wrote the book, and I don't think many people have actually read it. But I think most of the reason why I wrote the book, it was a form of catharsis for me to kind of understand, who I am. I mean, I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. My grandparents are were born in India. I grew up in the UK, and then I was living in Canada. And so the question was, who am I? Am I Indian? Am I Kenyan? Am I Canadian? Am I British? It was very, very confusing, because, who am I? And so that's number one. And number two, to your point, is sometimes, and I know this for sure, is that I had a particular view of the world, and based on my own mental construct, I didn't like myself, and that led me to feel very depressed and suicidal for over 40 years. And that was because of my own worldview about myself and my own mental construct about myself and how and about others and how I fit in with others. And it's really, really bizarre, but to think that how can you possibly be creating a view of yourself that leads to such a terrible outcome, and yet yet I did. And it is so important. It's so important to understand this. Exactly.
It's interesting that when we in past conversations, Dhiren, is that I recall, and I want to talk a little bit about your background. I think it's really important for listeners to understand what you just brought up around, that kind of view of yourself, I guess, the filters of which you saw yourself, the way you judged yourself, leading to depression and suicidal thoughts. Yet here you are. I mean, you're very astute. You're a very astute businessman. You're incredibly intelligent. And, you've certainly got the credentials to validate or prove that, if you will. But you also, at that time, as I recall, you were dealing with some anger. Like in your life, you were dealing with some anger issues as well, right? And you've kind of got that managed. You went on a very, I guess, God journey, if you will, of discovery. And so you've done a lot of different things. And then one of the things that brought my attention back to you as I followed along on some of your social media is your conversation around depression and, stemming from your experience and how it kind of showed up. So you go through this big identity crisis. Where am I? Who am I? Gosh, what culturally, where do I fit into this even? I'm sure there's lots of that. So I'd like to unpack that a little bit with you,
Sure.
Dhiren, and share your story. Let's go back a little bit. You're born in Kenya,
Correct. Nairobi.
Nairobi, parents from India. Uh,
My father was also born in Kenya,
uh,
and my mother was born in Uganda. But my grandparents were were born in India. But
uh,
ethnically, obviously, I'm Indian. So
got it. So, okay, so you go on this big journey. You're scholastically off the charts. I mean, you do some really cool things.
oh
So,
my God, Patrick, you're saying all these things. It's really making me blush. I can't. But anyway, thank you. Thank you very much. So,
but it's true. And I can tell you, I've been in many boardrooms with you, and it is nothing but awe-inspiring to see you at work in real time. But let's talk a little bit about some of your educational background. So, give us a kind of a recap educationally where you're at. Then I want to talk about business, and then I want to circle back to this negative self-talk and the depression
okay.
and all the things.
Okay, sure. So, well, I went to one of the top 3 high schools in the UK, and I won a scholarship to be there. And when I was coming to the end of it, I was top of the class there in I did science, physics and maths and chemistry. Then I won a scholarship to go to Cambridge to study engineering, and then I graduated there with a 2-1. And then I went to the top business school in Europe, and I graduated with distinction there.
Mhm.
So I am very good at doing exams.
Okay, so I mean, one of your I don't want to call it a claim to fame, but one of the many accomplishments that you've had was graduating from a very unique, or what do we call it, special kind of INSEAD, in terms of when you think about universities, that's kind of the top of the heap, as I recall.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of it was at that time the top business school in Europe. Yeah,
Mhm.
INSEAD. Yeah, top business school in Europe.
Now you've worked with you've got your MBA, as I recall. I'm going by memory, so.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
And then you started getting out into the working world. I mean, you've traveled the world a number of times. Give us a little bit of a,
okay. So I obviously we moved to the UK when I was 6, and I was pretty well much in UK until I went to INSEAD in 1994. So I was 28 at that time, and that was based in France. After leaving there, I joined a strategy consulting company called Monitor, and became a strategy consultant. And together with Monitor, I ended up doing assignments. So I lived in India for a while, and then ended up in Brazil, in Rio, for about a year. Then from Monitor, we were consulting to, at that time, a company called BG PLC, which is now owned by Shell, which is a oil and gas exploration company, has operations across 26 countries, and was investing £1 billion each year in projects. And at age 34, I became head of strategy worldwide for them, advising them where to invest £1 billion annually, which was an amazing job to have. And then with them also, I then ended up going to India and set up a optical fiber broadband business for them in Surat. And that's where I went and had an encounter with God, a bit of a sabbatical. And then God moved us to Canmore, where I met Tori Weber, the creator of Thermoblade, in a meeting. And later on, I found out that God had told him that I was the one who was going to help him, get Thermoblade off the ground. And that's how I ended up in Thermoblade, and that's how I ended up meeting you. So he moved us to Canada, and then I was in Canada for up until 2009. Then I went to Sri Lanka. Did a few things there, and then back to the UK, and I've been in the UK since. But I totted it up. I mean, I've lived and worked in 11 different countries and 5 continents.
So you've done some really interesting and incredible things in your life. Let's talk a little bit about where the negativity, where do you think? Now I know you've examined it, you've done a lot of, self-reflection, and you see, the issue of depression for many people. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form a expert on depression. I probably know very little about it, just enough to have me form an opinion and get me in trouble. Give me some insights into how it was for you, because I know depression is often, no, I'm told that depression is often can be just a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's a is the physiology and the chemistry of things throws things off. There's a, some belief system that I've talked to different experts who've actually said people can't be depressed if they're not focused on themselves. It's literally impossible. So, it goes back to the old phrase of, find a bigger problem. There is really get outside of yourself and depression can exist. Now, I don't know if that's true. I'm just stating some of
So,
the things
well,
I've
I
come
think
to believe that. So, but for
so.
you,
All of those things are true, and but they're kind of like a if you're examining a mountain, they're kind of just seeing a particular part of the mountain, and it has. I mean, obviously, it is accurate when you look at it with that lens or that prism, but there's a kind of I'll give you my kind of thing, which hopefully will give a context to why those statements are true, and also that actually so let me just go into it. So the first thing is um, let's go through and examine each one of those one by one. So it is about your focus on yourself. So depression occurs because you look back at the past and you're unhappy with kind of what's happened and where you've got to. So if you look at the past, you'll kind of pick up on those moments that hadn't gone how you wanted them to do, and so dwelling in the past will and human nature tends to dwell on those things that tends not to be totally great, and then you'll end up kind of beating yourself up. All right. So if you don't look at the past, then you won't be judgmental on yourself, and your judgmental attitude towards yourself is what results in depression. And you kind of start being upset. I don't like how I did that. I don't like the consequences of what I did. I don't like, and then you get to the point, I don't like me, right? So it's basically, it is in that way, it is a kind of a focus on yourself, a very critical, hypercritical focus on yourself. Now, in many ways, is for me, and to some extent, it's kind of similar to most people. Is that I didn't like myself because I didn't feel that I fitted in, and that because I felt that I wasn't. I didn't fit in, and I felt that I was kind of like a bit odd, and I'm neuroatypical, so I am a bit odd, and those things that made me odd, which are made it difficult for other people to kind of interact with me because I was different, and so they didn't know kind of how to deal with me, and because I was different and thinking differently, is that I was always wondering why it is that people don't understand what I'm saying or doing, and of course they don't, because they're processing in a different way, hence the the worldview and all the rest of it. So you kind of feel as if you're kind of totally alone, and you don't want to be. The point is that we as people, as Homo sapiens, are really built to be in relationship, and we want to be surrounded by people who understand us and respect us. So this kind of, I was constantly looking for somebody who will understand me and accept me just as I am, and not as not to be something different and things. So this kind of like I'm just, and ultimately it comes back to something that we were just talking about just before we started off, is that I just didn't feel comfortable with who I was. And I didn't want to be who I was. It's that, and I heard Jim Carrey say this once, is that, each of us writes the script for our lives. We act the script, we direct it, and we produce it. And we are creating the movie. And he says is that, you know, one of the most appalling things is that why have you written a script and a story where you're this character that you really don't like? And I mean, you know, it sounds so bonkers when you say it that way, but that's the truth. And you know, until you realize that it's you've written the script, and you don't have to have the script written that way. And until you know, kind of embrace the fact that, you know, you are what you are, and there's lots of good things about you, things that, you know, you was always work in progress and things that you can improve. But until you get to that point, you know, you've got this really crummy script that you've written, and you've written this really crummy character that you don't really like, and you're playing that role. Bonkers.
Well, yeah, it is, and it is an odd psychology behind it, I'm sure, and I know that you would have gone on the journey of self-discovery at some point because you got tired of beating yourself up, and or you know, you literally stepped back and said, "What in the hell is going on with me right now?" You know, whatever drove that. There was, I'm sure, perhaps a number of forks in the road that you went through that had you look at it. You know, I've come to a place where even in my own journey, or you know, understanding in terms of the coaching that I do, is that having people come to the conclusion that they really are making choices of who they're being. So back to your description of what Jim Carrey shared, is how you're showing up, how you're being is a choice, and we have to look at the choices we're making. So at some point you said, okay, I've got to stop being who I am and looking at myself through this lens. But you know, it's interesting, you know, Dhiren, as an observation, of course, you know, you, in terms of intelligence, you're there. I mean, your IQ, as we've had over the years, different discussions, it's off the charts. You're a smart dude, at least scholastically. I mean, you know, you can do math, you know, that most people would have trouble doing in their calculator. You're doing it in your head. So, you know, I'm thinking about all you've, you know, the life you've lived, the accomplishments, the acumen that you've got in so many different industries, you know, business acumen, and yet you're struggling in behind the scenes with identity. Like, who the hell am I? Because I don't relate to people. When I listen to your, and knowing your story a little bit and understanding, you know, you're uber intelligent, you know, from a scholastic or being smart intellectually, intelligence, you're, you know, you're definitely in an upper percentile. You've traveled the world, you've done so many things and created all this business acumen. Like, you've done, you know, from an outsider looking in, it's like Dhiren Master, you know, genius, does shit, you know, does math in his head quicker than most people will do it on a calculator, has a totally different view of the world, has a track record to prove it, you know, living the dream, traveling the world, you know, doing all of the things. So from the outside looking in, it's like, wow, what a cool cat, what a smart dude, what a great life. Yet you internally are kicking the shit out of yourself, going, I'm a loser, I don't relate to people. Now, in that context, what I was, you know, would shine a light on is that, you know, what you shared with Jim about the Jim Carrey quote is that we are the producer, the director, the writer of our life. You know, it's a tough message to get to people, is that, you know, our life is a reflection of the choices we make, the choices we don't make. It's a reflection of how we view the world, but also how we view ourselves. But it's
Yes.
all a choice. It's all a
Yes.
choice.
All
So
a
you
choice.
finally got to a point, and it took you a long time to do that, which was to say, I'm looking at the world through a set of filters that most people don't relate to. Now, there's all sorts of reasons for that, but ultimately, you're beating yourself up because you don't feel like you fit in. And then you realize, you finally come to a conclusion that goes, hold it. If people can't like me for who I am, then that's okay. We're not destined to be in relationship, or it's this type of a relationship, and then we move on. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. So when you think about over, you know, let's say in the past couple of years, you finally came to a conclusion that goes, yeah, people just got to like me for who I am, and I'm okay in my own skin. I am okay being who I am, and ultimately, I will live morally, ethically into my values, and I'll align with those people that share those common values. Now, that was
Exactly.
intended as a recap.
Yeah. And you know, I'll add something to that. And you look absolutely right, Patrick, on all those things. You know, it was a set of choices that I was making. And you know, the one thing that all of us need, all the 8 billion of us on this planet, we all need to be felt as if we are loved. And one of the problems that I had was because I was being critical of myself, I did not love myself.
Mm.
And I was looking for that love from other people. Now, the reality is that, everybody else is also on a kind of on a spectrum of kind of beating themselves up. And sometimes, we're all dealing with our own stuff. It's very difficult to kind of give love. And so if you're looking for another person to give you that love because you can't love yourself, you're always going to be constantly disappointed. And that
Mm.
was the light bulb moment for me. I was thinking, hang on, how can I expect somebody else to love me if I don't love myself?
Mm.
Whoa. Honestly, it was like, I mean, it sounds so blindingly obvious, but I thought, how can I expect that? If I don't love myself, then how can I expect somebody else to love me? And that was it. Because, of course, is that, if I love myself, then, I'm not relying on somebody else and I'm not going to be disappointed. I'm only got myself to be, and I can, and I thought, yeah, this is it. And that I can choose to be okay and actually not only okay, but love myself for who I am. And it kind of is that, it was very difficult for those around me to uh to love me. It's very difficult to love somebody who doesn't love themselves. It really is, because they're constantly like, "Bleh, bleh, bleh." And so that was it. And then the moment I realized that, I said, well, love yourself. And of course, there are different reasons why people don't end up loving themselves, right? And in my case, is this, that. But the point is that for whatever reason, you end up not loving yourself. And I'm not saying in a narcissistic way, but just in kind of like, stop beating yourself up. And the moment that you realize that, and you realize that, if you start loving yourself, actually you become a lot more lovable.
Of
It's
course.
just really, I mean, it's so blindingly obvious, but my goodness, it was only, I mean, I've been in that state since 14, and it was only at 56, 42 years later, that the
Wow.
light bulb uh, dropped.
But why
I
do
mean,
when you think about that, Dhiren, and I got a number of questions that I'd like to unpack with you around it, because I think it's a very interesting and a good conversation to have for listeners that may be going through similar things.
mm,
First off, if I asked you the question, what does loving yourself mean to you, or what does it look like for you, or what did you have to change to kind of get there? I know that can get a little bit deep or esoteric perhaps, but can you put some meat on the bone of what loving yourself really meant to you, how it shifted, or what is it that you had to shift about you?
so so I'll try to articulate what it is. It's a very good question. Is I think the main thing is, I am who I am, and I can't be anybody else other than who I am.
Mm.
Because if I could be somebody else, I would be somebody else. But I am who I am. Number one, right? You are who you are. And number two is that all of us are trying to be the best that you can be, and we're all in a state of evolution. So I realized that, well, I am who I am. I know that I'm trying to be the best that I can be. um I there are things that I could be better at, and I'm working on them. But hey, I am who I am, and I can choose to focus on the things that are good about me, and I can also look at the things that I'm working on and saying, look, this is all work in progress, and at some point, that also will become better. And so I'm in a state of evolution. Everybody's in a state of evolution. It's like understanding and recognizing that a caterpillar is a perfect caterpillar. It's not an imperfect butterfly. And
Mm.
I am turning into a beautiful butterfly, but I'm a caterpillar at the moment, and I am what I am. I mean, a caterpillar is what it is, and it is what it is, and I am what I am, and I am.
So
Does that make any
let's
sense whatsoever? I know it's just like
no, it's
long.
all good. It's all good. These are great conversations to have. Because it's so interesting for me when I have these kinds of conversations to see a view of the world, from somebody who I know is got all of this stuff going on, but you're dealing with all of the things that you deal with through the set of filters that you have. There's a fundamental, and it's something that I've kind of been very clear on. When we're being a contribution to others, when our purpose is to be a contribution where we're making a difference in the world that's outside of us, that
Mm,
really is, I think, the secret sauce, if you will, to having a very fulfilled and a great life, as if we can take that. Now, that isn't the case for everybody, by the way. Some people are just by design okay to just kind of go through life, raise their children, be a contribution with their own family, and that's fine. And I think that's great, as a matter of fact. The point
Yeah.
is that an individual like you, perhaps an individual like me, we want to be bigger, we want to be bolder, we want to make a bigger impact in the world. One of the acronyms I came up with in a meditation many years ago was success is simple, significantly impact many people's lives every day. So be a contribution. Now,
Love it. Love it.
in behind all of that, there's a part of it that says human need is to, what I said was, have significance. Now, I've used that language, and in a friend of mine, Alan Kahn, who is just an amazing personal and professional development coach, he said, Patrick, he says, I understand what you mean by that word, but what people really need and really are looking for in terms of how you're using significance is they're looking for acknowledgement. They're looking for appreciation. They need to know that they're being appreciated in the world. They need to understand that they're making a difference, and that is what is by nature the psychology of it. Now, where am I going with this? I'm not sure. But when you look at all of what you've gone through and you're seeking love outside of it, was it a case, do you think, of you searching for that acknowledgement? Somebody saying that you're amazing, you've made a big difference in our lives, we appreciate you, and that you weren't finding it, or at least maybe you weren't hearing it. So again, long-winded, but I wanted to set you up.
No, absolutely. So let's get on the couch. Let's get on the couch and do a bit of
I love that.
a bit of Freudian analysis on this. So look, the bottom line is that for whatever reason, me growing up as a child, I didn't feel that my father and my mother acknowledged or gave me enough feedback to say, good job. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's very important. I want to just focus on the words, is that I didn't feel that I was sufficiently acknowledged. Now, as far as they were concerned, is that they were doing all they could to acknowledge. But for whatever reason, is that as a child growing up, I didn't feel it. Right. So it's really important to understand is that, is that of course my parents love me to bits, and I know that they do, and I'm living with them again. I know that they do, but growing up, I didn't feel it, and so there was this constant kind of there was this kind of hole that I'm not having that validation, right? And unfortunately, this is the kind of stuff, and I was angry. I was angry about it, that. What do I have to do to get a good job? So and I was angry about it, but because I didn't feel I got the good job. No, I didn't feel I got the good job. Right? Of course, my mum and dad are incredibly proud of me. They always have been, and they've always been showing that. But I just didn't feel it. So you're right. Is that that is really important, because you want to feel that you are contributing to, and be it that you are contributing to your family and giving your family love, or contributing to society, or contributing to your job, or whatever it is that you're doing, you want to feel that you're contributing and that you have purpose. Because if you don't feel you have purpose and that there is a point of your existence, then the automatic and logical conclusion of that is, why are you alive? And therefore there's no value for you to be, and you might as well just top yourself right now, right? So so without feeling that you have a purpose and a valid contribution, and you are getting that validation, then you'll end up with this way. So I think the chap was partially right, but I think also is that, and what I would just basically say is that validation, the most important validation, needs to come from you, about you, because you can't really rely on other people to give you that validation.
Well, I think that as kids growing up, because and I think you may recall, maybe you don't, but I did what was called the Hoffman process through the Hoffman Institute.
Yes,
And
I do remember.
Yeah, and so it's a great body of work, really life changing for many, including myself. But it really was about negative love syndrome. Now, that's kind of where it is, and that's not all of it. I'm not doing it justice in saying that. I'm not minimizing that, but that was a really impactful part of going through the process, which was understanding that our parents do the best they can. The
Mm,
negative love syndrome is that, from kind of inception or zero to puberty, we're really only looking for our parents' love. That's it. That's all we're looking
absolutely.
for. And
Yes.
and
And
if
that's
we don't,
all that matters. That's all that matters.
that's all that matters. It
Yeah.
is all that matters. And the negative love syndrome is if we don't get that for whatever reason as kids growing up, and it's parents are always doing the best they can. Let's give parents, that leeway is that they're always doing the best they can. And so that doesn't necessarily translate in a really powerful way as a kid. The point is this: we get older, we get out into the workforce. The whole one of the concepts of negative love syndrome is that we're always trying to impress our parents, even as adults. It's like,
Yes.
so I
Yes.
ask you this question, and this is a question I actually ask coaching clients, but I ask the question is that, here you are, you're 45 years old, you're 50 years old, you're 35 years old. How many decisions do you make in a day or in a week or in a month? How many decisions in your life are you making as a 40-year-old, let's say, that you make the decision, you go a certain way, and you wonder yourself, what would mom think of this? What would dad think of that? Now, seems pretty kind of a normal thought process for many. They go, no, I think about it all the time. I think about what would my dad say about this? What would my mom say about this? And then you ask yourself the question, why the hell does it matter? Your parents just want you to be healthy and happy. Full stop. That's it. That's all they want. And they may have a view of decisions you make, but ultimately, why are you as a 40-year-old caring what your parents would think? That's an interesting psychology, isn't it? But there is the negative love syndrome is, and I put this to you because you're very accomplished. I mean, you've done so much scholastically in business. You've done some really cool things. And it's the negative love syndrome is, look at me. Do you love me now? This goes back to the question. So look at me graduate, on the dean's list or top of my class. Do you love me now? Look at this job I got, for this $70 billion company. Do you love me now? So we start to get into this world. And I know it is a little bit being on the couch, but it is such a dynamic, isn't it, of
It
how
is.
our life evolves. And it's not trauma. I'm sure your parents
Yeah.
didn't beat you. So
No, 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 not at all.
but
Not
that's
at
my
all. Not
point,
at
right?
all.
It is such an interesting kind of psychology to
Yeah.
how we deal with things. So, anyways, I throw that on the table for you to
So, so,
dissect the way you do.
you're absolutely right. There was a point right through my 20s where I was asking myself that question.
Mm,
And then I got married. And then, I stopped asking myself the question is, what does dad think?
mhm.
And then because at that point I realized that, it doesn't matter anymore. And I actually stopped asking that question. But then I started asking another question is, what does my wife think?
Mm.
Is
That's
my
a good
wife happy
question.
now with me?
Well, she's your
And
partner.
and this is the unfortunate thing. I unfortunately she she tended to be a glass half empty person.
Mm,
And this is the problem, right? Is I had dealt with my so I had a spot of therapy in my when I was 30, and I did deal with my mommy and daddy issues at that point.
mm.
But then I'm swap them out with uh, uh, partner issues. And she just was just relentless. Partly kind of moving around. She didn't like moving around, right? She just
Mm.
wanted to stay in one put, and she didn't like the fact that I kept on changing jobs and blah 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 blah, and all the rest like that. It was like, why can't we be normal? Why can't we just stay in one place? And why can't you be normal and have a 9 to 5 job and this and the other thing? And so, unfortunately, I'd replaced uh, mom and dad with partner, and I think it's very important because, you know, you can end up dealing with one set and then end up replacing either with a partner or with a somebody at work or with a friend or perhaps the kids, whoever it is that you just we have a tendency is that until, and I think it's also to do with energy, right? So I had this kind of like you know uh you can beat me up. A kind of I'm a doormat written all over my forehead. So and you kind of attract the energy that you are emitting and stuff like that. So one of the things is that yes, it can be oh, what would mum say now, what would dad say now, and then it can be replaced with, oh, what is this person going to be saying now with me, and then if that person goes, then it's somebody else. Is that what would my line manager be saying to me now as well? So it's really important is that I don't I mean, in many ways, right, is that each of those individuals was doing whatever they could do. They were doing whatever the best that they could do. But in many ways, is that how you were viewing it, how you were perceiving it, is that you were just replacing it. The fact is that I'm a doormat written, and I had chosen to write I am a doormat. And it's only until I had to rip that I am a doormat off my forehead. And that took 42 years.
Wow. So fascinating, isn't it? I love it. Well, but you know what else I love though, Dhiren, is that what I think is so great, is that you got to it, number one. And we're all on our own journey. And,
Thank
God. I remember years ago Stephanie asked me the question. She goes, so are you where you thought you'd be in life? And I kind of thought about that question. And this was many years ago. And I said, yeah, I think, yeah, I am actually. I would have just chosen a different path to get here. And she goes, yeah, but then you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be who you are.
Absolutely. 100%, Stephanie. Bang on.
And I went, oh, good point. So, the fact that, it took you 42 years or whatever that, to get there is really just what you bring forward is the wisdom and the knowledge and the experience that is very, very powerful. And I know that you love to make a difference in other people's lives, and you're sharing that. And so in the context and the conversation that you're now having, are you, what is the message that you want to get out, for example, around depression or about self-discovery? What's your message these days, Dhiren?
So look, I think I'm trying to think of what the generalization would be, but I mean, I think the most important thing is to realize that it's how you're viewing things that makes a difference. And if you don't love yourself, you can't really expect somebody else to love you. So you have to start working on loving yourself, number one. Number two is sometimes it's difficult to do that work if you're having somebody that whose opinion that you really value is saying things to you that are not particularly positive. In which case you have to get away from there. Now, if it's somebody at work, you need to, if it's a friend, dump the friend. If it's workplace, then get a new job. A bit more difficult to do. And if it happens to be a family member, just try not to interact with them or put a kind of Teflon force field. If it happens to be a partner, then this is a really, really tricky one. Then you need to tell your partner. If your partner can't stop it, then you have to say, look, I just don't think this is not good for me. It's not healthy for me. And that's really, really difficult. But you have to say, look, I think it's better that we're not partners, because it's just it's destroying me. And so you got to basically do that. You got to do your own internal work, and then you got to just make sure that you've got an environment where that isn't there. And then hopefully, if you do that, then your energy changes, and once your energy changes, you won't attract that. But you also got to realize is I realized that because my energy was what it was, I kept on attracting it. So you attract what you are, and until you can change your energy, you're going to still keep on repeating those same patterns, right? So it's really important to understand that ultimately you've chosen this. You've chosen your energy to be a certain way, and until you change your energy, you're going to continue having similar experiences. So that's what I say. And I've got to also say is that look, it isn't easy, but living the way that you are with depression and suicidal thoughts is not easy either.
Hmm. Good for you. Now, you had, as I recall, a interesting story about your relationship with God or finding God, or there's something that was I recall is quite powerful. And we don't necessarily align on that, by the way. I no, your story is your story, but we don't align on that religious Christian view of the world. I believe in God. I believe in a higher power. I just I'm more, I guess, around consciousness and universal kind of law, and definitely being a high power. I just don't necessarily refer to it as God. Uh, I often say I'm more spiritual than most Christians, but that's just my judgment of things. So tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, okay. So I will. You're absolutely right to categorize our differences at the point that we last interacted, but a whole bunch of stuff has happened since then, and we're probably more aligned now than you
Mm,
realize.
mm,
So yeah. So what happened to me is I had this amazing job. We've already alluded to that. I had this amazing job. I was 34, and just like it was just like a dream job. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And I was, oh my goodness, I was earning significantly more money than I could spend. All right, and it was just like amazing. But I looked around the room, and the I was reporting into the board, and I looked around the C-suite and all those other guys that were 20 years older than me, and I looked around and I thought, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like them. And I kind of realized that at that time, well, given what we are, we all, you will remember, Patrick, that film Wall Street,
mhm,
Gordon Gekko. Yeah, greed is good. And I said to the CEO at that time, I said, look, you've got Gordon Gekko on one end, you've got Mother Teresa on the other. I've lived life mostly at the Gordon Gekko end of things, and now I want to be a bit more like Mother Teresa. And so that's what I said. And I basically thought, look, I've got to, there must be God out there, and I really need to connect with God, because I really need God to help me kind of become, deal with all my stuff and everything, and I need to go back to the original manufacturer and get the manufacturer's warranty on this, and ask to be fixed. So I went to India, to all intents and purposes, set up the broadband business, but I really went to India looking for God, and it was there that I had a supernatural experience with Jesus. He appeared to me, he talked to me, and at that point, I gave my life to Jesus. And then we were filled with the Holy Spirit, and the same thing happened to my wife. She was also had a different spiritual encounter, but she also had a spiritual encounter. And we went around, and everyone that we prayed for, that asked for prayer, they kind of believed that me and my wife had a special connection, and they believed that God would answer our prayers. I mean, they would have answered their prayers as well, but they just didn't believe. But so whoever we prayed for was healed, and then at some point later on, we ended up going to joining a Pentecostal church, if you could call it that. It's independent Pentecostal church, and so on. And so that kind of took us into a whole kind of area of interacting with Christians in India, in Sri Lanka, in Canada, and in the UK. And so I did spend quite a bit of time being an itinerant pastor in Sri Lanka. I had a cable TV show where I was sharing the message of God and explaining the Bible and stuff like that. So all of those things happened. And at the point when I saw you, I was full on with this stuff. And now what I've then since realized is that in some ways, if you ask me, are all religions the same? I would say very superficially, yes, of course, is that they all believe in some kind of higher power, and that you need to be a good person. But then, you know, the answer is no in terms of how it's interpreted and all of the dogma that goes around it and all the rules and stuff like that. They're very, very different, you know, across the major religions. But then, if you ask me again, is that the core spiritual truth in all of them is the same, and that spiritual truth is that there is a higher power, and it's all about love. It is all about love. And, you know, is that all of the spiritual truths of all the major religions are focusing on, you know, it's not about you, it's about a higher purpose in love, a higher purpose. And our purpose here on this planet for each and every one of us is every day to become a slightly better version of ourselves than we were yesterday, number one. And number two, do everything in love. Everything in love. And, you know, and more importantly is that that's basically it. And love means not judging. So looking at someone and saying, you're going to go to hell because you don't go to our church, or you're an unbeliever, or this thing or that thing, you know, labeling people judgmental, judging people is not love. And you know, it's really quite amazing. So the message, you know, the message of Jesus is love, and in fact, the message right through it, Jesus actually just makes it a little bit more easier to understand. But the reality is that if you're a Hindu and you are trying to do karma, it's all about karma. But if you don't love, anything that's not done in love is bad karma. Anything that is done in love is good karma. So if you are a good Hindu, you're going to have to believe in Jesus. And of course, the 10 Commandments are all about love. And so are the 5 pillars of Islam. They're all about love. And so, you know, ultimately, is that love is the most practical thing to do. And each religion was given to a particular group of people at a particular point in time, talking the language that was relevant to that group of people at that time to explain things in that time. So, you know, I've come to that conclusion, and that's actually what this book is about. Is, you know, the spiritual, this book, Thoughts on Metaphysics, Spirituality, and People, is trying to explain is that. And I come to the point that, you know, that this higher power is an 11-dimensional quantum field, and it created this 4-dimensional construct which we're in, and then blah 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 blah, and that we are symbiotically living with this 11-dimensional consciousness field, which is love. So that's what I come to it, and all of these are expression of, but, you know, love, and, you know, there is, and when you come to that. And if we were all to realize that all of these things are all about love, we would realize there is no difference. We are all the same species. We're all Homo sapiens. And you know, the way that we're behaving right now is we're going to destroy each other and destroy the planet. You know, we're pretty close to completely destroying the planet to a point where there's no recovery. We're on that crux, and if we don't get our act together very soon, we will end up destroying the planet and destroying everything on it.
Now, when you say that, I don't think you're talking about climate change.
No.
You know, you really are just talking about the world as it unfolds today, the divisiveness, the polarity, the hate, the fear mongering. I mean, it seems at just epic proportions.
Oh my God. It's just, I mean, you know,
but Dhiren, just a quick question for you. And you're well-traveled, and I am to a different degree, but sometimes I wonder, is it just because social media is so now blatantly reporting it all that we're able to see it all, and it's always been bad, it's just now we see it? Or my sense of it is it's got significantly worse, driven by leaders with agendas that nobody can even wrap their mind around. But what's your kind of philosophy or thought process on it?
So, you know, it's really interesting. I think it has. I think the darkness has got worse,
Mhm.
And part of it is because it's never been easier for somebody to manipulate somebody else than it is today.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just like phenomenal. I mean, in the old days, you'd have to occasionally hope that they'd go into a movie theater and see a film, a propaganda film. But these days, you can blast your propaganda message to somebody every 2 minutes.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just unbelievable, the power of manipulation. So, I think on the one hand, and I wasn't talking about climate change. I mean, I think the real problem isn't climate change. The real thing is how we're depleting the earth of resources. Plastics, rare earth metals. In the old days, I mean, you can't even change a plug anymore. I mean, in the old days, we used to wire our own plugs, right?
Mhm.
Is now you can't change a plug because the whole thing's fused. You have to throw the whole thing away. You have to throw everything away. The moment that it stops working, you have to throw it away. You can't fix anything.
Mhm.
This is what I'm talking about. We're just completely ravaging the planet, just destroying it and ravaging it. So, but anyway, the point being, you're asking is, I think that on the one hand, the darkness is getting worse, but at the same time, is the light is getting stronger. Yeah, and it's really weird because these kinds of conversations that and you would have noticed this too, I'm sure, is that over the last 15, 20 years, is you're having well, I'll ask you, I mean, are you not having more spiritual conversations with more people than you have been before?
I don't know that I am, and here's let me just kind of back that up a little bit. First and foremost, I learned many years ago my purpose and understanding that I'm always having those conversations. I've been having these conversations for 35 years or more. And that's kind of always been my calling. I just gravitate to those deeper conversations. Like these kinds of conversations we're having today are pretty normal for me. And and to the degree that Stephanie and I launched our podcast of Mindset Matters, it really is understanding our own psychology or understanding ourselves, having that awareness to discover what is it we're searching for. So, is there more of it? I don't know. My observation is this: is COVID put us over, or the pandemic put us over the edge in terms of the polarity and the divisiveness driven by political leaders that
Agreed.
is
Agreed.
just so hard to imagine. But
They
I
took it
think
to levels unimaginable. I agree.
unimaginable. And yet we're in it. Like it is an interesting time. It's a fascinating time to be alive, although it's frightening. I think that there's so much uncertainty, so much confusion. It's really hard for people, myself included, to really decipher and make decisions. And so we have to look to find answers within ourselves, to be really clear on who we are, how we're defining ourselves, what are the values that light us up, what truly
Yeah.
are our values and not somebody else's values. And I think people are really searching more than ever for something. And that's part of what is creating the divisiveness.
Agreed, agreed, and it's creating this polarization, and I think, I mean, what I found is that the darkness is increasing in its intensity, but also so is the light, and the light at the moment is a relatively small percentage of the population.
Mhm.
But I also believe this is that we're coming to a point where uh, mankind, Homo sapiens, has the ability to have enough energy, control over energy, uh, you know, fusion bombs, hydrogen bombs, whatever, to blow all of us up. And if it gets into the hands of a number of very committed terrorists, that will be it. So what's going to happen is, in the next 30 to 50 years, we'll either blow ourselves up, or we will realize that this is utter madness
Mhm.
and flip the switch. And so, I do believe that we'll end up flipping the switch, because if we don't flip the switch, we're going to annihilate ourselves, because all this hate and stuff like that, all this kind of escalation and stuff like that, is going to end in only one thing, which is just mutual destruction. And
Mhm.
we'll either be mutually destructed, or we'd end up flipping the switch and realize this is all completely mad, and go on another path. I also believe that the higher power um, um, in some ways is that because time works differently, is that we are ultimately we evolve into the higher power. So I do believe at some point we will flip the switch. As as bonkers as it might be, I think the switch will be flipped, or will annihilate itself. But we'll know in the next 30, 40 years for sure.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for sure, it's unfolding, and it's almost a good versus evil. It's the dark versus the light. Many are riding. They're riding the white horse, while others are
Yeah,
riding the
it's a
black horse.
great Hollywood
Classic movie,
script.
and goes
It's a
back
great movie.
to classic movie. It is an interesting time to say the least, and I know my own commitment is to make a difference in the world, get a message out there, create food for thought. It's why I've really enjoyed this conversation, Dhiren. It's been great to
No, thank
reconnect
you,
with
Patrick.
you.
It's been
And, for listeners, I really do. And I know it's uncomfortable for Dhiren sometimes to take a compliment, but I was in boardrooms with you many, many times, spent many hours hanging out in the world that we hung out with. And I really got to see your genius at work. And it was really so it really was a kind of a pivotal time for me. It changed my view of the world. It was a bit of a fork in the road
oh,
in terms of relationships. So good job. Uh, you know,
thank
and I'm
you.
only blaming you for
It's
the
so
good
kind.
stuff. I'm not blaming you for any of the bad stuff that happened.
Uh,
I joke. Okay,
yeah.
so we've attempted to solve some of the world's problems. I think that we've done a pretty good job in terms of that. As we
Good
start to
job,
wind,
Patrick. Good job. Good job, Dhiren. Good job.
good job, good job. So you are appreciated. So when I like to wind down the show a little bit and do what we would call some rapid fire questions that I always add that they're not all that rapid fire. But you've come to a place in your life, and I know that you're facing just normal life struggles. But I do have one question for you. Given where you are today, what's unfolded, do you still have some strong optimism? Are you still really excited about the future and what it holds? Given what's happening in the world, given where you are in your life, are you still pretty fired up about the future?
Yes. And look, I'll be 58 this year. But this next bit is going to sound really bonkers. I think I'm just about halfway through my life.
Hmm.
And I think there's and this is I'm going to throw is that you inspired me. Obviously, you're slightly older than I am, but oh my god, when we met, you were the fittest guy amongst us, right? And so and the reality is that you there is age is only something that you have in your mind. So I believe I've got 60 years ahead of me. This
Beautiful.
sounds bonkers.
Well,
So
I no, by the way, I don't think it is. I think that given technology, given our awareness of how
yeah,
to be healthier
yeah,
and live healthier,
yeah,
quite frankly, I think 120 is probably very achievable.
yeah. And I mean, I've done the whole body fat thing. I mean, my metabolic age is 40, right?
Mm,
So and
good news.
yeah. So so
So I
I'm
don't
surprised.
know. I don't know if you pay attention. If you saw, I'm officially a senior citizen. You know that, right? I turned 65.
Your biological. What's your metabolic age? They come on, tell us
Oh,
what your
I
metabolic
have no
age is.
idea.
Yeah, I bet you must be 40 or 41 or even
Well,
38. I mean, I don't
I
know.
went through this. I had this opportunity to do a test. So I was tested at just over 60. So they were doing in Calgary. They were doing this whole test against older men, as
Mm.
in 60 plus, and they were comparing them to triathletes. And so, anyways, I went through this series of literally, what is it when they put you in the tube and they
Yeah,
examine.
yeah. It's that's the most advanced body fat
Well,
test. Yeah.
this
What
wasn't
was your?
body fat. This was actually they were checking my heart. So just
Okay, okay, okay.
I'm just trying to think of what the piece of equipment is called. Doesn't matter. Why it slipped my mind, I have no idea. It's where they like put you on a stretcher, you wheeled into this tube, and I was in there. I think 90
The
minutes.
MRI. They did an
MRI.
MRI.
Yeah, thank you. So they're checking me
Oh, they
all
did an
out, and
MRI. Okay.
yeah, a significant. So what they were doing is they're doing this whole study, triathletes, younger triathletes compared to older men who were who were fitter, but not necessarily fit, who were relatively healthy, didn't have to be healthy. They were just trying to get benchmarks. Anyways, I had the opportunity to do that, and I did that. So I went in with the nurse and the technician. While I was in the tube, the doctor showed up. You know how doctors are. They just kind of breeze in. They're just reading the charts, right? And he looks at it, and Stephanie was in with the nurse because of the circumstances. Anyways, the doc says, he goes, if I wasn't looking at this patient's age on this file and just looking at what's on my screen, I would say he's 40 years old. And I went, and like he said, this actually, even like he said, there's nothing around the heart. Like he said, this is very, very rare. So he said, let's pay attention to this one, and as in, let's keep this file. So anyways, I felt very special in that moment, and particularly heart healthy anyways.
No, exactly. And this is the thing, right? And and I'm sure that you're still, some few years after that, you're still at 40. And I mean, I did my first triathlon when I was 50, and I try, and they say basically that if you can keep your body fat percentage to 13%, you'll never have heart disease, you'll never have cancer, and you'll never have dementia. To answer your question, I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. I'm incredibly optimistic about my life. I think, I've never been. I do. I'm no spring chicken, but I also know that I'm incredibly more productive now than I've ever been, and there's things, and I'm constantly learning new stuff as well. So I'm very, very optimistic about, and I also believe that light will prevail, and I also believe that. Oh my God, this is really a bit grandiose, and I believe that that every experience that I've had is leading me up to something that is quite important, and that there is real purpose and real necessity for me to still be here on this earth, in this astral realm.
Fantastic. I use the phrase, I'm older, wiser, and a little wider. But anyways, we digress.
But you're not that. I'm sure you're not that wide either. I'm sure you're not that wide. You're looking. I can just about see those. There's the only kid. Yeah, never mind. So let's get back to these questions. Now, I know you're an avid reader, but do you have a favorite book that was powerful, impacted you, or one that you like to gift because it has such good meaning? So this is going to be cheesy, but of course, it is the Gospels, right? The four Gospels. What Jesus says. You have to have that on your reading list, number one, right? Then there are other books. There's a book by Viktor Frankl called Logotherapy. Oh my God, you have to read that book. That was really, it's all about purpose and stuff. Viktor Frankl, Logotherapy. Then there's a whole bunch of books on the art of self-deception. I can't remember. Oh, the Arbinger Institute. Also really kind of an amazing kind of book. And more recently, I came across this author, David R. Hawkins, and he's written a series of books, Power versus Force, Transcending the Levels of Consciousness.
Yep.
Unbelievable. Oh my God. I wish I had come across those books earlier. Unbelievable. David R. Hawkins, Transcending the Levels of Consciousness. Just unbelievable. Amazing.
Well, what's cool about this is that I've had, probably hundreds of guests on my show over the years. Nobody's recommended any of those books, so that'll be interesting. Look at those up. I know Marnie, who does my show notes, will be making a note of that for me. So,
well, what about? You must have had somebody recommending the Gospels in the Bible, surely.
No.
Okay.
No. And we've had some really. I've had more than a few believers in a big way, but no, they didn't.
There you go. Look, let's just. Dot.
It's interesting. Is I consider the gospel, the Bible, kind of like a owner's manual of life. So it really lays
Yeah.
out the rules for people
Totally.
who can't figure out what the rules are. So
Yeah.
that's really what it is. That's how I look at it. And I
I agree totally, 100%.
Yeah, I read it many, many years ago. Okay, so iPhone or Android?
Android.
Of course, I knew that. I already knew that.
I Android.
Okay, what's a job that you do even though you hate it, but you're good at it, so you keep doing it?
Building really complex models, spreadsheets.
You are the spreadsheet king, and I know
I
some
am the
people who do some
spreadsheet
big
nerd jock.
You're
Jock spreadsheet jock. And I think PowerPoint afterwards is another one.
I share this with listeners. I've sat in boardrooms where Dhiren actually created a spreadsheet on the fly in real time in front of 15 guys who were all MBAs, and they were all just sitting there with their mouths hanging open going, oh boy, what are we dealing with here? That was very funny times. Do you have a favorite inspirational quote?
Be the change you want to see in the world, Mahatma Gandhi.
Beautiful. I agree. It's one of the best. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the gates?
Good job.
Good job. I appreciated you. Your room, your desk, or your car, what do you clean first?
Room.
Now you're a bit of a musician. You like to sing. You like to play the guitar a little bit. Do you have a favorite tune or a favorite band, a go-to?
I mean, I do a good Elvis karaoke. So I also like 60s music because it's really upbeat and stuff, right? So, anything by the Drifters, all that kind of stuff, it's just really, really, I find it wholesome. So that's the kind of music that I like. And then of course I do like, if I'm in the car, I will tend to listen to classical just to kind of chill and not get worked up with all the other silly drivers on the road. So there you go. I mean, I think that's basically.
I think driving in traffic is a real test of one's resolve to live in love. Okay.
For sure.
Do you have a favorite movie?
Lord of the Rings. I absolutely the Lord of the Rings I really love a lot. I just think it's really
a cool movie. Final question, Dhiren, and thank you so much for your time today. What are you grateful for?
The love that's in my life.
Beautiful. I love it. I would have to say I'm grateful for that as well. I'm also grateful to have reconnected with you, and lots of memories came flooding back. So it was awesome. I love your humor and your laugh and what you shared today.
Thank you, Patrick.
Very, very impactful. So thanks for your time.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my favorite subject.
Okay. You. And oh, by the way, Dhiren, good job. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Good job, Patrick.